The cutting game is a big part of offensive strategy in women's lacrosse, and it's pretty important to develop this part of your game, especially if you want to thrive as a player at the high school or college level. You may wonder why cutting is such an important part of the women's game. First of all, remember the obvious fact that you are one of 7 offensive players on the field, and there is only one ball. So, when your team is on offense, you're only going to have the ball in your stick about 1/7 or 15% of the time on average. Another way to look at it is that 85% of the time you won't have the ball. So, as an off-ball player, the big question becomes, what are you going to do when the ball isn't in your stick? How are you going to help generate team offense as an off-ball player? In other words, how are you going to get yourself open or help to get a teammate open to generate offense? You can do this with picks and off-ball screens, and you can do this with spacing and movement, but another really good way to generate off-ball scoring opportunities is with your cutting game. So that's one point. It's also important to understand why the rules and defensive tactics of the women's game make cutting such an effective strategy. First off, the 3-second rule applies to the defense, and this means the area inside the 8-meter is going to be open for cutters if the offense does a good job with their spacing. The rules also limit what an on-ball defender can do to the ball carrier in terms of stick checks and body checks. This gives the ball carrier a lot of advantages over her defender. So the defense usually ends up sliding a lot to double team the ball carrier when she dodges in and around the 8-meter area, and this often forces other defenders to make secondary slides. So all of this sliding action creates a lot of cutting opportunities for any off-ball player that understands how to anticipate, read, and exploit their defenders' slides. Finally, the rules do not allow defenders to stick check or intentionally block the path of an off-ball offensive player. This makes it easier for cutters to move where they want to and catch passes without interference. All of these factors add up to make cutting a very effective strategy in women's lacrosse. The cutting game is fundamentally a cerebral contest between you and your defender. It depends on your ability to read the field in 3 ways, make quick decisions, and use deception to mask your intentions. First, read the middle. A good cutter is constantly looking into the 8-meter area to identify open space and cutting lanes. You need to keep your head on a swivel and constantly switch your vision between looking at the ball as it moves around the offense and looking into the middle so that you know the path you want to take when you make your cut. Second, you need to read the ball carrier and time your cut so that she is in a position to see you make your initial move and pass the ball to you quickly. For example, don't start your cut when the ball carrier has her back to you or is focused on another part of the field. Ideally, you and the ball carrier will make eye contact before you begin your cut. And remember, when you make your cut, hold your stick up where you want to receive the pass. Third, read your defender. Remember that your defender needs to pay attention to her team defense responsibilities as well as covering you. So your best opportunities for getting that first step or two ahead of your defender come when she has her eyes turned away from you. Try to start your cut in those moments when she is looking at the ball carrier or another player and not paying attention to you. It's also important to realize that most of the time when you make a cut, you are probably not going to get the ball, either because the ball carrier didn't see you in time or you didn't get open enough for a pass. But that's okay, because there is no such thing as a wasted cut. Every time when you make a cut, your defender, and maybe other defenders, have to focus on you, and that means they're not focused on the rest of their team defense responsibilities. That's still making a big contribution to your team offense, because fewer defenders are available to help in that moment, and your teammates can exploit that. So let's move on and take a look at some basic types of cuts. There are 2 basic types of cuts. There's a front door cut and a back door cut. In a front door cut, this is where you cut in front of your defender to get between her and the ball carrier and receive a pass. In a front door cut,
You don't always need to be fast, but you do need to be good at timing your cut and establishing your body position in front of your defender in order to get the ball. The rules prevent your defender from checking an empty stick, so she cannot interfere by checking your stick before you receive the ball. Here are some examples of front door cuts. This clip shows a textbook front door cut. Watch the offensive player on the back side of the play as she cuts in front of her defender. Watching it again in slow motion, notice how the cutter waits for her defender to get caught watching the ball. The cutter also waits for the ball carrier to look into the middle before she makes her cut. With a front door cut, you don't always need to use explosive speed. In this example, watch how the cutter uses body position, not speed, in order to get in front of her defender, catch the pass, and make a nice shot.
Towards the left, inside, Donovan shoots and scores.
In this clip, the white attacker cuts through the middle looking for a pass. Then she establishes position in front of her new defender, looks into the middle for available space, and then makes her cut for an easy pass and a catch. In this example, watch the player behind the net as she cuts in front of her defender. Looking at this again in slow motion, notice how the cutter uses deception to set up her defender and make her believe she's not part of the play, and then explodes around the net. In this clip, watch how the cutter in the tan uniform adds some deception to her front door cut. Watching this again, notice how the cutter begins her move and then appears to bail out of it, which gets her defender to relax. Then the cutter makes her real move, which gets her open for a pass and a shot. If you are good at catching the ball under pressure, a front door cut allows you to get the ball even when you can't get a step on your defender. In this clip, notice how the cutter catches the ball even when her defender is right on top of her. Here's another example. Watch how the cutter uses a front door cut to gain position on her defender and make a nice quick stick goal even though her defender is still with her when she catches the ball. The second type of cut is the backdoor cut. You set this up by allowing your defender to maintain a position between you and the ball carrier. When your defender looks at the ball carrier or moves into a weak position, you cut behind her toward the goal to receive the pass. In this clip, look at the center of your screen as number 22 in white makes a backdoor cut on her defender to get the pass. Looking at this again, notice how the cutter jabs to her right and then makes her first step to her left before she cuts to the net. This turns her defender around in the wrong direction. In this clip, watch how the attacker in white makes a flash cut to the net, and then, as she's returning to the top of the 8-meter fan, she makes a nice backdoor cut on her defender. This is a great example of being creative in the moment. Sometimes your defender will play you very aggressively, either to prevent you from getting the ball or to look for a steal. This is the perfect time for a backdoor cut.
Northwestern offense, that's second in the nation at over 17 goals per game. Bouncer in front, Taylor to stop.
In fast break situations, the defense often gets caught staring at the ball. This is a perfect time for a backdoor cut from behind the net.
To run to the cutter, McMahon, top corner, Izzy McMahon.
Hesitation can be a really effective technique when you're making a backdoor cut.
And a shot.
Let's look at it again in slow motion. See what happens to her defender when she starts her cut, hesitates, and then continues cutting. The front door cut and the back door cut are typically straight line cuts to open space in front of the goal, but you don't always have to cut in a straight line. An example is the curl cut, where you start by cutting away from the ball carrier, or maybe parallel to the ball, and then curl back toward the ball carrier for a pass. Sometimes you curl cut around a teammate or another player in order to force your defender to follow you around the obstacle. This follow the leader game can give you a 1 or 2 step advantage when you curl back to the ball to receive the pass. Or you can cut away from the ball carrier in open space and then quickly curl back toward them, using your body position in front of your defender to protect your stick to receive a pass. Let's look at some examples. In this clip, watch the attacker in the black shirt directly in front of the net. She'll cut around behind her defenders and then pop out in front of them for a pass.
As for Northwestern, this is a high-octane offense. Looking to score and strike quickly, they do once more.
Pass off to Carly Booth.
Here's an example of a curl cut in open space.
Passes it off to Maddie Miller and back up to Gwen Devon with a quick pass in the center and a nice quick stick right in.
Another effective cutting technique is to change direction. One thing you want to think about when you do this is which hand you want your stick to be in when you make your final cut. Here, watch the player cut toward the middle and then change direction and cut down to the net. In this clip, watch the attacker as she maneuvers behind her defender and ultimately gets in front of her to get a pass and a goal. Looking at it again in slow motion, notice how the cutter exploits her position behind the defender. She jabs right and then cuts left behind the defender, getting in front of her eventually for a pass and a shot. In this clip, watch the attacker in white change direction to cut in front of her defender for a pass. Another important principle in cutting is to get outside of your defender's view of the ball. This basically means to try to get yourself in a position where your defender can't look at the ball and look at you at the same time. Ideally, you want to get your defender in a straight line between you and the ball. Because the ball is constantly moving and your defender is constantly moving, you also need to constantly move in order to maintain this alignment. The closer you are to your defender, the easier it is to maintain this alignment, however. It's a lot of work, but good cutters do this because it forces their defender to focus on them and not on the ball and team defense, or when their defender looks at the ball, it provides opportunities to cut. In this clip, watch how this attacker slides down the alley behind her defender and then cuts across the crease for the pass.
The range of athletes that they have and how deep their bench is. They'll play freshmen, seniors.
Here, watch the cutter close in with her defender, align her with the ball, and then cut. Here's a couple more examples with the same player. These are just some of the basics for developing your cutting game. The best environment for developing your cutting game is small-sided pickup games like 3 versus 3 or 4 versus 4. But wherever you're playing or practicing, just start cutting. Just start doing it. Start learning how to manipulate your defender, learn the timing, learn to look for space. All those little things that go into it, because you only get better at cutting if you practice. And remember, if you make a cut and you don't get open, there's no downside to it. You occupied your defender and you kept the offense moving. Eventually, you'll get better at it and you'll come to realize how important cutting is to your lacrosse game. In part 2 of the Art of Cutting series, we'll look at what happens when your defender leaves you to slide to the ball carrier. In the meantime, thanks for watching and keep getting better.